everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made for Stretch the Sketch. In Stretch the Sketch, we take a sketch that's intended for a 12 by 12 inch scrapbooking layout, and we either stretch it to a larger format or we shrink it to a smaller one. This week I am shrinking the sketch to a smaller format. The page that I have here is 6¼ inches by 8½ inches. I'm using a really old My Mind's Eye collection, and it's called Splendor. It gives off Maggie Holmes vibes, but it also has that My Mind's Eye feel too. So this is a collection that I really love. I don't have a ton of it, but I definitely have enough to make a layout of this size. The sketch we're using for September is by Jen Hedger, and that was made for the Dusty Attic. I really like this sketch. I love the way there is a cross with a large strip of pattern paper going vertically and then a thinner strip going horizontally. I'm using the 6 by 6 inch pad and I'm piecing 2 sheets of paper together. And then here I'm using another My Mind's Eye paper. I'm not sure what the collection is, but this one looks a little bit more like a solid, so I thought this would be good to back this larger strip of paper. To go horizontally, I'm using this strip of paper. This is also from the Splendor collection, and I like the way this pattern is a little bit more concentrated than the other pattern. Whenever I'm using 2 different patterns on a page, I like them to be a little bit different in scale or differ in some way so they don't blend together. Then I use another piece of paper from my stash that looks like a solid to back that strip, but I'm going to change that in a little while. Just like in the sketch, I'm using 2 photos. The larger photo measures 3¼ inches by 2¼ inches, and the smaller photo is 2 5/8 inches square. Unlike in the sketch, however, the photo at the top is horizontal rather than vertical. I was a little worried that that was going to cause a problem with the composition, but I think that by switching the place that I have the title, I was able to balance everything, and I'll show you that in a little while. I mounted both of my photos on that darker paper that I used to put behind the smaller strip, but then I thought that it would probably look better if that smaller strip was mounted on some of the same color cardstock that I had mounted the larger strip on, so that way both strips have the blue color behind them and both photos have the darker brownish color behind them. I thought that would make the layout a little bit easier to read. I'm inking the papers in the background with some Distress ink in Vintage Photo, which is my go-to color for inking the edges of elements on my layouts. The photos that I'm using in this layout are of my mother. They were taken in the 1960s, and I've scrapbooked them before. Several years ago, I took a class with Janet Fritz called Impactful Storytelling, and I talk about this a lot on my channel because I have made a lot of layouts for the album that I created in response to this class. The albums that I've created in the past have always been about my daughters, and this class really prompted me to think about my own story, and I think that that's something that my kids would like. Even though I'm sure they want to have their story documented, I would love to have something like this about my mother, so I thought that this would be great to make for my children as well. So I finished all of the scrapbooking layouts for one album, and now I'm working on making a second album so that I have one to give each of my daughters. The nice thing about making the second album is that I know exactly which photos I'm going to use on each of the layouts, and I printed extras the first time around for most pages, not all of them. So in some cases, I already have the photos ready to go, which is a huge help when starting a layout. I still have a little bit of work on the journaling that goes along with each one of these pages, but once I have that finished, I'll be able to print it out twice and put it in both albums and maybe finish a project, which is something that I haven't been so good at recently. I really liked the idea of documenting some stories about myself, my childhood, my parents, things that probably would have gotten lost if I hadn't told them in this book. So I think I would like to go a little bit more in this direction in the future of not just telling the stories of my family right now, but also looking back at some stories from the past or the distant past, because by the time I end up scrapbooking my photos, it's always pretty far in the past because I have a lot of scrapbooking that I still have to do. So I'm moving the title to the top of the page to have some balance. There's really nothing there at the top. So I'm using this sticker that was in a matching sticker sheet, and I'm going to cover up the picture that's there. There's a picture of little children. I don't want that there. Instead, I'm going to use this for my title. And I backed it with both of those pattern papers that read like solids that I've already used on the layout. So first I backed it with that bluish green color, and now I'm backing it with the brownish color, each time inking the edges with the Distress Oxide in Vintage Photo. On the sketch, there are some circular elements. I'm not going to use circles on the page, but I am going to put my clusters of embellishments in those places where the circles are. I'm using some stickers from the Splendor collection. For the smaller pink flower I'm working with right now, I cut the leaves off so that I could layer them underneath the flower to make the embellishment a little bit smaller to fit in that space. And then I left the other sticker cluster as a whole. And once again, I'm inking the edges. I love using florals on my layout, and I especially thought that florals would look nice with these pictures of my mom. I used a paper punch, and I punched out a piece of pattern paper to fit over that picture that was on that banner that I got from the sticker sheet. And now I'm using another part of the sticker sheet. This was actually attached to a tag. It says "So Beautiful," and I thought it was pretty. It has a little sentiment on it, so I thought that fit nicely on the banner. And then once I had attached that down, I attached the banner down to the layout. Off to the left of the layout, you can see that I have a whole bunch of fussy cut flowers and some leaves too. Some of them are a little larger, and then there are some really, really tiny pink flowers that I thought would be nice to work into the clusters to have different scales of flowers. I use the flowers and the leaves to add to the existing clusters, and I also created a third cluster in the upper left-hand corner. I thought that that would help to balance out the page. Because I used stickers that were from a dimensional sticker sheet for two of the clusters, I decided that I would use some foam and pop up one of the flowers in the third cluster so that there was a little bit of dimension in all three clusters. Then I used some ATG adhesive to attach the flower that I popped up down, and then I layered the pink flower behind it. It took me a little while to get it arranged exactly the way I wanted it. Sometimes I find that little changes can make a really big difference. Changes in placement and angle could just really change the look of a cluster. So I tend to fuss around with the clusters quite a bit. I also moved the title slightly over to the right to give that cluster a little bit more room. Now I'm taking those little tiny pink flowers and I'm adding just a couple of them to each of the clusters. Again, to vary the size of the flowers. I think that always makes the clusters look a little bit more interesting. Then I went around the layout and attached all of those small pink flowers down with the ATG adhesive. I tried a couple of different embellishments for the banner that has the title. I started off with some enamel dots that are from the Splendor collection, and I put one small dot on each side. I then decided that I had them too far in and moved them out a little bit. Then I started adding some of these die cut branches to the page. I end up taking all of these off. I think that they're pretty, but they were just a little bit too chunky maybe for this layout. If I was going to use something like this, I probably should have used something that was a little bit more delicate. And in the end, I decided that I wasn't really a huge fan of them, and I'm going to be taking them off in a moment. Before I remove the die cut branches from the page, I added some bling. I use these very, very tiny stickers from Angel's Crafts called stone stickers. They come in strips and I cut them into individual pieces and I use them as little accents around the page. I changed the enamel dots to 2 stone stickers, and then I ended up taking those stone stickers away too. You can see here that I have removed the die cuts from the page, and now I'm adding just 2 photo corners. I punched this out of a scrap of paper that I had from all of my fussy cutting, and I included one on each photo, once again inking the edges before placing them on the page. And then I added a small pearl to both of the photo corners. I just love the way that gives a finishing look. And I figured, let me try the pearls on the banner at the top. That's the third thing that I've added to that banner, trying to get just the right thing. So I often leave my layouts on my table after I'm done with them. Following day, I did not like those larger peach colored flowers. They were too big, and I felt like that color matched in too much with the background, and I wanted there to be some contrast. So I ended up removing those flowers from the two clusters that I had them in, and then I replaced them with some fussy cut flowers that were a little bit darker in color and I thought stood out a little bit more. These flowers are also quite a bit smaller, and I think that it went along much better with the scale of the page. I think that the flowers that I had on originally are absolutely beautiful, and I'm definitely going to save them for another layout. It was very easy to just take those stickers that were nice clusters and put them on the page, but I had to accept that the page is very small and it needed some smaller embellishments. When I was fussy cutting out some additional flowers for the layout, I also cut out some leaves, and I'm adding some of those flowers and leaves to the clusters now. I don't want them to get too large, but I do like the idea of having lots of detail in each one of the clusters. Another thing that I wasn't crazy about after looking at the layout for a while was the title. So I removed that sticker. I ripped the paper underneath it a little bit, but it doesn't matter because it gets covered up. I used a pocket card that said beautiful on it, and I cut out the word beautiful. I inked the edges, and now I'm mounting that title on a little bit of pink pattern paper, and I layer that over that large banner. And I thought it was kind of funny. I couldn't decide whether I should put enamel dots or pearls or jewels on the title, but in the end, you can't see the embellishment that I put there anyway. Along the way, as I made all these changes to the clusters, some of the little jewels were taken off, so I returned those to the clusters. Then I used a very, very tiny image of a flower. I fussy cut it out and I attached it on top of the title. I thought that that added a nice little touch to the title cluster, and then it tied it together with the clusters on the rest of the page. I added one more flower to the cluster on the bottom left. This layout is now complete, and here are just a couple of close-ups. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video. I really, really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed it. Please check out all the other Stretch the Sketch videos. The links to those videos are in the description box. I hope you have a fantastic day. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.